Chapter 3. Dax rose early, pulled on his Levi's, slipped into a cotton shirt, and eagerly started his day. He devoured a hearty breakfast while waiting for the grocery store to open. He pondered how to make his trip to Montana safe and uneventful. This trip would have a profound impact on the rest of his life, and he wanted it to turn out perfectly. He didn't want to have to use the guns he bought. At 8 o'clock, he paid his restaurant tab and walked to the grocery store. He bought as many non-perishables as he could carry back to the hotel, packed them in his car, checked out of his room, and paid for his parking. Finally, he began the drive west that held so much promise for him. Dax turned right onto the road he'd walked from the shootout to Skokie, then took an immediate left and parked in front of the barn where he buried the money. He scrambled out of his car, quickly opened the big, sliding barn door, and drove inside. He closed the door, confident that no one saw him. The morning sun shone through the large square opening above the door where a Jackson fork hung on its rusty pulleys. He pitched the hay off the hiding place. It was obvious no one had tampered with his buried treasure. He traded the pitchfork for his shovel and dug up the soft dirt around his stash. His adrenaline ran high. He worked as if he were killing snakes. Within 30 minutes, Dax had the bags dug up. He unloaded all the supplies from the back seat and reloaded everything, placing the valuable bags at the bottom. He tied down the load, threading the rope through eyelets in the canvas. It took only 15 minutes to fill the hole with dirt and pitch loose hay over the disturbed ground. Dax looked out. Seeing nothing, he opened the big door, backed out, and closed it. His heart nearly stopped when a Model T suddenly pulled up behind him. "Does this road go to Skokie?" the man inside asked. "Yes, it's about 7 miles. Dax pointed north. "Thanks," the man replied, backing out onto the road. Dax didn't like that someone had seen him here. He backed out of the barnyard and drove 100 feet south, stopping at the intersection where dry blood permeated the pavement. A police car coming from Chicago's direction slowed at the intersection and turned towards Skokie, driving within inches of Dax's car. 2 policemen in the car crept by the house and barn, craning their necks, looking for anything they could see. Dax cranked his steering wheel and headed west. His forehead glistened with sweat, and his heart did not calm down for 20 miles. Dax thought it was about 150 miles to Madison, Wisconsin. At 35 miles an hour, he should be there by 3 in the afternoon. Minneapolis would be about 9 hours further. At 8 p.m., he stopped in Black River Falls, Wisconsin, filled his tank with gas, and found a turnout on a rural county road where he could park and spend the night. Tying one side of his tarp to his car and staking the other to the ground, he made the makeshift tent he had envisioned. He laid the smaller canvas on the ground and his new bedding on top. He laid his loaded .30-30 and .38 revolver on one side of his bed and his loaded 12-gauge shotgun on the other, all 3 in positions he could readily reach. He was tired, not so much from the drive as from the day's mental stress, especially when the police car slowly drove by the barn just seconds after he pulled out onto the highway. Whenever he was not contemplating his next move, he was thinking about the girl in Chicago tugging on his heart. Dax woke to the sunrise, his stomach growling for a good breakfast like it had been treated for the last few days. His back told him how much he had enjoyed the nice beds he'd recently been sleeping in. His legs, however, rejoiced that they did not have to walk 20-plus miles each day like they had since he arrived in New York Harbor. After eating 4 slices of salami and an apple, Dax rolled up his bed and tied it. He loaded everything back into the car, covering it with the tarp he tied securely over the seeds that would grow his life's dreams. Just last week, Dax's dream was to homestead 160 acres of Montana wheatland. With his newfound wealth, he was eager to explore the endless possibilities of much bigger dreams. In 2.5 hours, Dax filled his gas tank in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and again at noon in Minneapolis. He had driven 400 of the nearly 1,400 miles to his destination. He stopped again for gas in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and after topping off his tank in Alexandria, Minnesota, he found a secluded camp spot to rest for the night. By 10 a.m. the following day, he gassed up again in Fargo, North Dakota, and made it to Bismarck on his third night. His fourth night brought him to a field near Circle, Montana. On the morning of his fifth day, Dax knew he would get to Great Falls by nightfall and then to Conifer Cliffs in only one more day. He chose Conifer Cliffs because he liked the sound of wheat land near mountains with similar distances to Missoula, Brookston, and Great Falls. Since he had no personal knowledge of the area, he relied on an advertisement put out by the Great Northern Railway featuring Conifer Cliffs. Dax woke on his sixth morning in a quiet spot alongside the Missouri River on the outskirts of Great Falls. His thoughts were consumed with finding a rural place to stash his money so he wouldn't have to guard it constantly. By 10 in the morning, he arrived in Moose Neck, Montana. It was only 70 miles to Conifer Cliffs. He took his time looking more in depth at the landscape as he drove on. Any place between here and his destination would be okay for a location to bury his stash. 20 minutes west of Moose Neck, Dax turned toward a south mountain range and drove 20 miles on a rough dirt road to a flat, hidden hollow where he set up his camp for the night. The next morning, at daybreak, Dax unloaded his car to retrieve the money bags from the bottom of the pile. He checked his pockets to see how much of the $3,000 remained. He counted out $1,222 and some change, so he took out $5,000 more from the same bag as before. Then, Dax carried all the bags down to a brushy draw and hid them in different places. He repacked the car with everything except the money, the guns, and the shovel. He stashed the .30-30 and the 12 gauge in the willows near the money. He wore the .38 in his shoulder holster, as he had every waking moment since he left Chicago. He took the leather briefcase and shovel and walked methodically, counting his steps to the hidden side of a dry knoll, where he dug a hole big enough to accommodate the briefcase. He paced his steps back to a metal stake he had pounded into the ground when he folded up his tent. It was 154 paces, as close to straight east as he could determine by the direction in which the sun had risen. He paced out 5 more dry locations from the stake and buried a bag at each site. Then, he drew a map to help him locate them later. Dax hoped he could get organized in Conifer Cliffs and return soon to retrieve the bags. But for now, he felt confident they were safer than the last place he had buried them, because no one here would be looking. He loaded his guns and shovel back in the car and left his camp for Conifer Cliffs.